In October 2019, the Pacific Gas and Electric Utility Company executed a series of public safety power shutoffs in anticipation of environmental conditions that posed a high fire risk in Northern California. Customers braced for their lights and internet to go out, but many weren't prepared to lose their cell service, too. Public agencies have been relying on social media and text alerts to get the word out about safety updates using platforms like Nixle, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Nextdoor. But with the possibility of losing cell service during a power shutoff, Californians were left wondering, when the grid goes dark, what communication options can we truly rely on? Is it time to go back to old-fashioned technology like the landline telephone? To answer that, let's take a short trip back in time. The telephone was invented in 1876. It was actually developed independently by inventors Elisha Gray and Alexander Graham Bell. They both registered for their devices within hours of each other at the patent office, but after a bitter legal battle, Bell was awarded the patent. Bell's original telephone and its original components are hardly recognizable today. By 1877, a new method made it possible to use copper and telephone wires, which soon crisscrossed the urban skies, like in this 1888 photo of New York. Advancements in telephone technology and infrastructure meant that by the 1890s, copper-wired telephones were controlled by local central switching offices. These offices not only handled traffic between landline telephones, but also powered phones through the very copper wires that connected them, which is why public safety offices generally endorse landlines as a reliable source of communication, even when the power is out. But during the shutoffs, some people found that their landlines didn't work either. It wasn't just customers who were left in the dark about their landlines. Even Mark Quinlan, PG&E's Senior Director of Emergency Preparedness, was misinformed about how their own power shutoffs might affect local communication systems. When asked how people should get information in the absence of power and cell phone service, he responded, "People could get the information the old-fashioned way, through calling on a landline." So why did some people's landlines stop functioning during the recent shutoffs? There are three main possible points of failure in the event of a power outage when it comes to landline telephones. First, power sources. Central offices today get their power from multiple sources, but for many of them, the primary source is still commercial power companies. In the San Francisco Bay Area, AT&T offices get their power from PG&E, just like everyone else. Luckily, all of AT&T's central offices are also equipped with backup sources. AT&T says that none of its central offices went down during the recent power shutoff, in part thanks to these backup sources of power. The other thing to consider is how phone technology has changed over the years. Starting in the 1980s, glass or plastic fiber optic cables started replacing copper wires due to the high capacity of fiber. The last copper transatlantic cable, TAT7, was constructed in 1978 and could handle 4,000 simultaneous telephone calls. In contrast, the first transatlantic fiber cable, TAT8, was installed in 1988 and could handle 40,000 telephone calls at the same time. However, fiber optic cables can't carry as much power as copper cables can, so fiber networks require an external power source. And fiber isn't just for telephone anymore. These days, most landline telephone services place calls over fiber-connected internet using something called VoIP. In fact, today, most offices, including sheriff's departments and universities, exclusively use VoIP desk sets that look like landline telephones, but actually place calls over an internet connection. In order to connect to fiber networks for phone or internet service, customers need to have something called an optical network terminal, or ONT, which has to stay plugged into a power source in order to function. They also have to come equipped with a backup battery that will function for 8 hours, thanks to a Federal Communications Commission docket issued in 2015. But the recent PG&E shutoffs in Northern California lasted for days, showing that the required 8 hours of backup power for fiber networks is insufficient. But even if your landline isn't on a fancy fiber network, the telephone itself can still be a point of failure. Only corded phones can draw power from a central office through a phone jack. More likely than not, people have cordless phones, and cordless phones use a radio signal to interface between the phone base and the cordless handset. Although the base of a cordless phone plugs into a phone jack, it requires more power than a corded phone because it has to power fancy components like speakerphone speakers, a liquid crystal display for caller ID, the answering machine, and, most of all, a power reserve to recharge the handset battery. If the power goes out, the base goes out, and the phone itself is then rendered useless. So, what's the bottom line? The fact is, landlines are no longer a foolproof communication strategy during an emergency situation. As these power shutoffs become the, quote, new normal, consumers need to take the time to review their phone services and prepare for the worst-case scenarios with extra batteries and alternative communication methods.